Once upon a time, a few people concentrated wealth, income, and power into their own hands. A few people ruled over territories. Success attracted competition. The concentration of wealth, income, and power into the hands of the few people made the competition to rule homicidal, genocidal, and even suicidal at times. For that reason, the few people became a few paranoid, oppressive, violent people. And the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people had special needs and aspirations. And their special needs and aspirations were achieve and maintain authority, power, order, and control. The few paranoid, oppressive, violent people gained influence over religious authority figures, and religious authority figures proclaimed to communities of faithful believers, "We have discovered these pessimistic myths are truths. A good entity rules in heaven. The good entity is at war with an evil entity. The evil entity rules over the earth. A system of divine eternal reward and abominable infernal punishment exists. The system compels the faithful. The faithful observe and obey the will of the good entity. The faithful exhibit unquestioning obedience and unswerving loyalty to the good entity. The faithful disregard and disobey the will of the evil entity. The good entity chose messengers. The good entity revealed words to the messengers. Religious authority figures wrote these words down in a set of sacred scrolls. Religious authority figures proclaim to communities of faithful believers. They have the ability, they know how to interpret and translate the words. And they proclaim to communities of faithful believers, these words reveal the words, will, and laws and ways of the good entity. This is the crucial part right here. The religious authority figures proclaim to communities of faithful believers, the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people are divinely ordained to rule over domestic territories. The few paranoid, oppressive, violent people are representatives of the good entity here on planet Earth. The will of the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people is the will of the good entity. So there, the cycle is then complete. We've made a circuit, right? With these ideas, with these pessimistic myths, they make a circuit, funneling all authority, power, order, and control into their own hands. And so this is how they enslave communities of faithful believers to the will of the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people. And if I was worried about living my best life, I'd probably be going along with this. Or maybe not. I don't know. At any rate, that's speculation. So they enslave communities of faithful believers to their will, and they demonize outsiders, right? Deify insiders, demonize outsiders. So religious authority figures proclaim to communities of faithful believers the outsiders are not divinely ordained to rule over foreign territories. The outsiders are representatives of the evil entity here on planet Earth. The will of the outsiders is the will of the evil entity. Our only hope of salvation from an afterlife of abominable, infernal torment, and our only hope of elevation to an afterlife of divine eternal bliss is observe and obey the will of the good entity. Right? Religious authority figures proclaim to communities of faithful believers, the good entity chose prophets. The good entity revealed visions of the future to the prophets. The visions of the future revealed. A final, necessary, horrible war will be fought. The good entity will have final victory over the evil entity. The few paranoid, oppressive, violent people will have final victory over the outsiders. The good entity will judge all people. The few paranoid, oppressive, violent people will judge all people. The few paranoid, oppressive people will find some people observed and obeyed the will of the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people. The good entity will find some people observed and obeyed the will of the good entity. A few paranoid, oppressive, violent people will reward these people. A few paranoid, oppressive, violent people will elevate these people to a place of safety and refuge. The place of safety and refuge will be a haven on earth. The good entity will reward these people. The good entity will elevate these people to a place of divine eternal bliss. The good entity will find some people disobeyed and disregarded the will of the good entity. Some people observed and obeyed the will of the evil entity. A few paranoid, oppressive, violent people will find some people disregarded and disobeyed the will of the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people. Some people observed and obeyed the will of the evil entity. Those people will be punished. They will be cast down to a place of danger and exposure. Some of them will be murdered upon arrival, and some will be enslaved under horrendous conditions. The good entity will find some people disregarded and disobeyed the will of the good entity. The good entity will punish these people. The unfaithful will be cast down to a place of abominable infernal torment and punished for all eternity. All because they did not, during their brief lifetimes, observe and obey the will of the good entity. Our only hope of salvation, this is what religious authority figures tell communities of faithful believers, which we're calling slaves, really, because they're slaves. That's what they tell the slaves. They tell them, our only hope of salvation from an afterlife of abominable infernal torment, our only salvation from eternal punishment is observe and obey the will of the good entity. And the will of the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people is the will of the good entity, because they're representatives of the good entity here on planet Earth, and because the good entity enables them. Few paranoid, oppressive, violent people are divinely ordained to rule over domestic territories. These prophecies, set down in a set of sacred scrolls, reveal what to us? They reveal how the story ends, right? The end of the world, according to religious authority figures, over whom a few paranoid, oppressive, violent people have gained influence. The end of the world is the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people win in the competition to rule. They defeat the outsiders, right? They end up ruling over the entire world. That's the end of the story. There's a sort of inevitability to it, and you better get on board with a few paranoid, oppressive, violent people now, because they're going to take over the whole world. So be a good little slave, work all of your life to the benefit of the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people who concentrate wealth and commit power in their own hands. And when you die, you will go to heaven and enjoy an afterlife of divine eternal bliss. That's essentially the message that religious authority figures, over whom the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people gained influence, deliver to communities of faithful believers. Essentially the message that religious authority figures deliver to communities of faithful believers in their institutions of spiritual slavery. So why am I talking about all this? Because we are liberating each other. Spiritual liberation is happening. It's happening right now. We are liberating each other from a spiritual slavery. The spiritual slavery follows from a belief in the value of a lie. The lie is, we have discovered these pessimistic myths are truths. Truth is, these pessimistic myths suggest truths about our set of living arrangements. The act of suggesting truths about our set of living arrangements does not make these myths into truths. These myths remain myths, unverifiable, unfalsifiable. And since they are myths, it is logical to ask, why choose to believe in the value of pessimistic myths when you could choose to believe in the value of the most optimistic myths?